Yes, hello from Bangkok. I apologize, it looks like I haven't got a video feed. So I'll just do a quick 5 minutes discussion related to decentralization from the perspective of UNCDF in the region. Just to introduce UNCDF, or the UN Capital Development Fund. We've been working with decentralization processes for the last 50 years. And we are heavily engaged in the region, working in most LDCs and some of the middle income countries. Specifically, my focus is in Southeast Asia. And I'd just like to bring up the trends which we are seeing in the region post-COVID, and also with the extension and the development of the BRI investments, which are typically changing, I think, the frameworks for decentralization, especially in Southeast Asia. So I'll just spend 5 minutes discussing these points. And also at this juncture, I'd also like to just respond to a question in the chat, which was very, very interesting, about intersectoral financing issues. So first of all, I think the report which was presented this morning was very, very interesting. I think there's a slight nuance question which needs to be asked in terms of, is there a mix between cautious movers and incremental movement of decentralization? And typically, I think we're seeing this in Southeast Asia, where both Laos, as an example, is very cautious and Cambodia is very cautious, but they do generally make a big jump every now and again. And what we've seen in Laos, for example, is the emergence of the provincial level as being a core focus for their decentralization goals and aims over the next 5 years, following a very similar pattern which was experienced in Cambodia. So they make that large incremental jump to go from a really the lowest level of decentralization process to this provincial level. And at the same time, they're changing a lot of laws at the same time. So it's really quite a large one. So it's a question where there is a mixed sort of movement in those two areas. Now, going back to the 4 specific trends of what we're seeing here in the region, the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, they're doing very, very large investments throughout the region. Laos is a good example, and Cambodia. And what we are seeing through these investments is, I would say, a narrowing of the decentralization process, where cities are actually becoming the center of a decentralization process. And these cities are quite specific cities in terms of the designated growth poles along these investments, which are forming natural corridors. And we're seeing that in terms of investment and in terms of financial flows, especially for capital investments. And we're also seeing some of these cities venturing into the avenues of commercial finance and access to capital markets for service provision. So there is a general shift where I think you see a narrowing of a decentralization process in alignment to a corridor development policy, which seems to be being followed in the region at central government level. And it's also following investments, especially the BRI and also the GMS from the ADB program. So that's one really important thing we're seeing. The second point I'd like to raise up is about taxation. And taxation for central government and own source revenues, that is becoming tighter and tighter, we are seeing. And this is also linked to the COVID situation. What we're seeing is that tax reform is taking place at a central level. And the tax reform which is taking place at the central level is basically all about increasing revenues. There is very little extension of that work we're seeing at the subnational level. Indeed, I would say the tax reform initiatives which are being developed and promoted are actually not only neglecting own source revenue collections, but also actually putting up barriers against the system in some places. So tax reform becomes a very, very essential piece of the jigsaw which I think we need to start to look at. In addition to the tax reform, we're in parallel to it. We're also seeing competitive tax regimes, which are taking away potential revenues from local government. And these are specifically around the special economic zones, which are usually placed in cross-border territories of local governments, and the local governments do not receive any financial benefits from those areas. In fact, actually, it provides an increase of service requirements as opposed to providing the finance to support further development. So tax is a real big issue, which we see it is being neglected and left behind in terms of the decentralization process. I will just go back on to the COVID situation, where we've seen a lot of innovation around COVID response, and this has been financed through various sources, of course. What we also see is this very worrying trend where budgets are being cut. And Cambodia is a very, very good example where the tight fiscal management in place at the central level has actually reduced the allocations being made to local governments due to the COVID and the COVID recovery process. This, I think, will be a trend which carries and continues for the medium term, especially as governments have lost a lot of revenues due to tax breaks and basically the response policy to COVID, which is going to be impacting the finances of government for the next 3 to 4 years. So I think this is a very critical feature which we're seeing. So finally, I just want to go back to the question which was raised in the chat about how intersectorial issues such as climate can be addressed by local governments. UNCDF have developed an IGFT, which is globally operated. It's also working very well in this region, which basically supports earmarked central funding for local governments for climate adaptation investments. And it's these types of models which we feel will push the reform process or accelerate the reform process at the subnational level in terms of physical decentralization. So this becomes it's a very interesting tool. You can actually read about it on the UNCDF website under the locale project designation for that. And finally, I'll just want to come back, if I look at my notes, about conditional transfers. The authors this morning actually suggested that conditional transfers would potentially increase or help move forward the decentralization process. I mean, at CDF, we actually agree that part conditional transfers may be useful, but there's also a requirement to ensure that discretionary transfers are in place, which allow the local governments and the local communities to work in partnership to really create their own investment projects and build up their own local economies. So I will leave it there, if I may, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Over.